Welcome to Alchemy Uncensored, a podcast presented by Alchemy Search, a team of professional financial and tax recruiters. Our podcast is dedicated to providing valuable insights into the financial and tax sector of the UAE by discussing the challenges and opportunities faced by employers and job seekers. Alchemy Uncensored is the perfect podcast for those looking to gain a competitive edge in the finance, accounting and tax industry of the UAE. Stay informed on the latest job market trends, developments and conversations to stay ahead of the game. Tune into our podcast to be part of this insightful conversation. Hello, fellow alchemists. Thank you for listening to the podcast thus far. 2024, big year ahead. The one favor I would ask, if you can, if you're enjoying what you're listening to, is to press the follow and subscribe button on whatever media platform you listen to us, as it helps us grow our network and grow the podcast. So thank you and enjoy the podcast today.
Hi, I'm Ritika Hardikar and I specialize in tax recruitment at Alchemy Search in Dubai. At Alchemy Search, we focus on finance and tax recruitment for the Middle East region. So today I'm back with a brand new podcast, and as always, it'll be focused on tax. We will be discussing about how businesses are preparing for the changes in tax landscape, the competitive tax market, comparison with tax practices globally, and artificial intelligence. But it's not going to be just about tax. We'll also be talking about matters relating to team building, flexibility at work, tips for job seekers, etc. So I'm honored to have Nilesh Ashar as our guest speaker for today's podcast. Nilesh is leading the tax practice at FTI Consulting in the UAE. He's an experienced tax partner with over 25 years of tax experience across India, UK, and the Middle East, with majority of his career being in the big four firms in these geographies. Nilesh has spent over a decade in the UAE, where he was leading the tax practice for a big four firm and has advised several large UAE-based business groups, private equity firms, and sovereign wealth funds on UAE, regional, international, and M&A tax matters. Nilesh now heads the tax practice for FTI Consulting for the Middle East region, and he has recently been advising clients on the UAE corporate tax preparation and readiness. Thank you, Nilesh, for joining us today. It's going to be an interesting discussion, all things about tax. So firstly, I want to congratulate you for completing 1 year at FTI Consulting. It's been over 1 year, right? If I remember correctly, it was Jan last year.
That's right. Yeah. So firstly, thank you, Ritika, for having me join your podcast. Very pleased to be here. It's been a year and a quarter now. Time flies since I set up the Middle East tax practice at FTI Consulting.
Right. So as we reflect on the year that went by, like all the tax developments that happened in the last 1 year, how was 2023 for you professionally? And I'm sure you have even bigger plans for 2024.
Yeah, no, I mean, 2023 was absolutely exciting on all fronts, right? So, it's firstly being, setting up a new tax practice at FTI Consulting and everything that goes along with it in terms of bringing the team together, getting the resources, getting our credentials and name out in the market. But equally, the market itself, as you know, with corporate tax introduction, was extremely active in terms of both conversations with clients as well as, projects as they started coming through. So I think from both perspectives, it was extremely exciting in 2023 and one that I think has set us up nicely for 2024.
That's great. And I know 2023 was a very interesting time to set up a tax practice from scratch, because it was just a time when businesses were getting ready for corporate tax implementation. But I also see that there's a fierce competition out there in the tax space.
Yeah.
How do you perceive the competition as a new practice coming in?
I think someone could say FTI itself is competition coming into the market. But I think that's expected, right? I mean, with new tax legislation coming through, one would expect more service providers and more consultants and consulting firms setting up their practices to service the market. I would not see competition and competing firms as a deterrent. I think some level of competition is healthy and is necessary. And the market is big enough. There's lots of businesses in the UAE that do need a lot of advice. So I think there's more than enough room and space for new players in the market outside of the big four.
Yeah, true. I think this market is very reliant on external consultants so far because maybe the tax laws are so new. So I believe there's a space for everyone because every business would have different requirements. So tax consultants do have the opportunity to carve a niche for themselves in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is the complexity of the issues that have arisen in the course of impact assessment exercises that we've done, certainly in the context of corporate tax. Does mean that there are or there will be service providers, there will be firms that will develop their niche around certain areas, whether it's to do with family businesses or with sovereign wealth funds or with private equity funds, etc. So that's bound to happen.
Right.
And I think alongside that, there has been an increased level of activity in the M&A space. And we're doing a fair bit of work on that side from a transactions support perspective on tax. So different elements of services do exist and niche areas do exist for all players to operate in the market.
Yeah, right. So even in your role now, you have had leadership roles in big fours or boutique tax firms, and now in a management consulting firm. So I'm just curious to know because I've spent 8 years in the big fours in a tax practice. So I have always been keen to know, like, are there any differences in the nature of assignments that you handle, or like maybe the approach or the methodology for the tax work?
So nature, I think it's a good question. I think if you look at, so the short answer, Ritika, is there isn't much of a difference. In the approach to assignments. I think what's changed as I've changed my career from Big Four to boutique firms and now at FTI is that the market has evolved in terms of the evolution of new taxes that has met, whether it was VAT in 2018 or ESR in 2019 or in CBCR and now corporate and transfer pricing and now corporate tax, is that because the legislation has evolved, the need for services have only expanded and also evolved. The need for more hand-holding in some cases, the need for more sophistication and advisory, the need for more planning has increased. So I think from that perspective, the nature of assignments are no different today in a Big Four versus something what we do at FTI. I think the difference is in the approach and the level of expertise that different firms and different individuals might bring to the table. But the nature of engagements has evolved with the evolution of taxes in the region, if you see what I mean.
That's interesting to know because I'm sure a lot of other people from the Big Fours would have these questions as well. So, and now in the UAE with corporate tax coming in, the anticipated Pillar 2 tax, how do you see businesses reacting to these changes? Like, do you think it makes UAE a little less competitive in the global scenario?
No, I don't think so. And I think the same question or the same set of apprehensions came in when VAT was introduced in 2018. And businesses thought there'll be a flight of capital and talent away from the UAE. Nothing happened, right? It's quite the opposite. In fact, there's been more, the population has expanded in the UAE over the years. The number of tax professionals have expanded. The number of tax teams that businesses have set up have only grown. Businesses have grown otherwise. And we've survived COVID and come out of COVID on the other side in a much stronger position. And I don't think corporate tax or Pillar 2 will have, will have an effect in resulting in flight of capital. And the reason I say this is twofold. One is that a well-implemented corporate tax system and Pillar 2 as well will be progressive to the UAE economy as opposed to pushing it back. There will be more comfort and solidarity that and comfort that businesses will have in setting up operations in the UAE, given that they would have had the blessings of the OECD and the EU and other countries. If UAE is introducing a corporate tax system and is participating in the Pillar 2 project, any apprehensions of UAE potentially being regarded as a tax haven or a country where you can set up offices and operations and park profits here should all be going away with transfer pricing, Pillar 2 and and these legislations coming in. So I would think quite the opposite, because the businesses will now get the opportunity to focus on non-tax factors,
Okay.
which there are plenty in the
Right.
UAE, to continue to attract capital and attract businesses. And as you know, with the free zone exemptions are still there.
Right.
I mean, obviously not
Yeah.
to the extent one may have anticipated in the past, but there are a number of activities that businesses can still legitimately do in free zones, backed with substance, that would still give them the 0% answer, which continues to make it attractive to be in the UAE and operate businesses in the UAE.
Actually, it's like, as you said, it's a step forward towards international best practices. So, of course, yes, there are taxes on one side, but on the other side, there is like increased transparency, compliance procedures, and of course, ease of doing business. Because I read somewhere like UAE ranked 16th out of 190 countries in the global ease of doing business index. So, I'm sure like this will continue to attract investors in this region as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I'm sure you've got the ranking there, and I'm not surprised with that.
So, based on your experience in more mature tax markets globally, what are there any significant tax practices or policies that you wish to see being implemented here?
Again, a very good question. I think, Ritika, there's some parts of it which already are being implemented, which I like
Okay.
being done. One clearly is the engagement with the businesses
All right.
that I particularly like. So we've had consultation that has come out on corporate tax legislation. We have consultation on Pillar 2. We had consultation on the free zone regime in the context of corporate tax. And we didn't have that when VAT was introduced. We had the
Right.
law and we had the
Yeah.
executive regulations, and businesses were caught unaware or caught napping, as you whatever you might call it. So I think I quite like the engagement with stakeholders that the
Okay.
Ministry of Finance has initiated. Obviously the jury's out in terms of how much of input is being taken, and obviously there is a fine balancing act that the government and the Ministry of Finance needs to do in terms of managing local expectations, but also adhering to international best practices and the
Yeah.
commitments to the OECD. So one is the whole engagement with the businesses, which I can see that coming through in the UAE, which is fairly prevalent in the Western or the more mature tax markets. The second, I would say, is a legislation and practices and audit practices that is intent based.
Okay.
So, particularly in mature markets like the UAE, like the UK, you do have tax legislation that is based on intention. So,
Okay.
whether you intend to carry out a business or whether you intend to hold, assets for a particular period of time, and it's demonstrating that intention that then drives the tax consequence. I would quite like to see that being incorporated both in the legislation and in guides and in practices by the
Yeah.
tax authority, because I think because intentions can change, right? So
Right.
if you've followed a particular course of action and therefore relied on a particular tax treatment based on intention, as we know, business models need to be flexible. The intention
Right.
can change, and therefore the tax, one should not be penalized historically or retrospectively for a tax treatment
True.
if the intention has changed. So I would quite like to
Yeah.
see that come through. And then I think finally, I would like to see more, particularly as corporate tax does come in and tax returns start getting filed and audits start from the FTA. I would like to see consistent approaches
Okay.
to audit procedures.
Yeah.
And I'm sure this will evolve.
Right.
But if you ask me the question, what I would like to see
Yeah.
in the UAE market from that perspective, I think those are the top three things that
Right.
I'd say would be on my wish list.
Yeah, it's just evolving. So I think few more years down the line. And when you're talking about intention, isn't that very subjective? Like how do they need to prove the intention? Is it more like documentation based?
Yeah, absolutely. There's obviously behind every decision,
Yeah.
commercial or corporate decision is an intention to do
Right.
certain activities, and I think that should be easier to demonstrate. Today it may not be on paper, but businesses should be encouraged to document their intention, provided the tax treatment follows the intention to
Yeah.
hold. So, there's a classic example where for holding activity under the qualifying free zone, there needs to be, and the holding period needs to be 12 months.
Yeah.
And I think, if we link that to an intention-based regime, that those intentions can change if there's a great
Yeah,
opportunity that
true,
comes through
true.
for a disposal. But I think if we are able to accord the tax treatment based on intention, that makes it more, that provides more stability
Okay.
to, and that's one of the things, right? I mean,
Yeah,
there are other things,
of
not
course.
everything can be intention based, of course. So I wouldn't want to, focus all my energy on this issue. But it is something that I think
Yeah.
ought to come in across all legislations, not just
Right.
corporate tax, but also VAT and,
Of
as
course,
Pillar
yeah.
2 comes through.
And now coming to the corporate tax readiness scenario here. So I'm sure most of the businesses would be on the verge of completing their corporate tax impact assessments or implementation projects. And now I believe the CFOs and the tax heads would be facing a mammoth task of like having a report in front of them and just doing the execution internally, because
Yeah.
that is when the main action would start for in-house professionals. So what would your advice be to CFOs and tax heads as next steps? Like what comes next after corporate tax impact assessment?
Yeah, I think, clearly the natural outcome is the implementation,
Yeah.
which has various, work streams that need to be done, particularly in the context of transfer pricing, where benchmarkings need to be put in place, year-end adjustments need to be put through, changes need to take place on the intercompany pricing, agreements need to be drawn up to reflect arm's length pricing. So clearly transfer pricing
Yeah.
is a big area of implementation. But I just want to draw a distinction between VAT and VAT impact assessment and implementation, and corporate tax
Right.
impact assessment and implementation. In some sense, VAT, given it is a tax on transactions, one had to be ready
Yeah.
by 31st of December 2017
Right.
for the first transaction on 1st of January 2018
Exactly.
to be a taxable supply, and the systems needed to be geared. And within the earliest tax return would have been 1 month from the end of
Yeah.
the first tax period, which would have been February for some businesses. So there was a lot more readiness that one had to do for VAT before the VAT legislation went live.
Yeah.
Corporate tax is a tax on the profits of the company as at the end of the year. So clearly, while there are some work streams that have to happen before the tax period starts, but it doesn't mean it's all done, right?
Right.
The impact assessment and the implementation can continue during the course of this year, and in fact, right up to when you file your first tax return, which will
Yeah.
be for calendar year in businesses, it will be September of 2025.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two, as business grows, as you expand into new geographies, as you enter into more agreements commercially, both with third parties and related parties, every new acquisition that you make, every new product that you launch, every new business activity that you engage in does need to be looked at from a corporate tax standpoint as well. Of course, from other legislations like
Yes.
VAT also. But what I tell most of my clients is that the impact assessment report that we've given you or any other advisor may have given you is not a report that is static in time. It does need to be a dynamic assessment that does need to be updated and reflected in your business model, and updated in the reports need to be updated, and practices need to be updated as business grows and as you do more activities and more transactions. So I think I've said a few things, but I think impact assessment most businesses would have or should have done by now. There are still many that probably still in the process of doing it, but implementation is a key area, and this will go right through till the first tax return. And there'll be several areas that will need to be looked at during the course of this year, and particularly for those that are part of Pillar 2 groups. Businesses that are part of Pillar 2 groups, obviously we've had the most recent administrative guidance in December. We've now had the Ministry of Finance consultation process. Outcome of that we will know in months to come. There is still impact assessment on Pillar 2 that needs to be done, and to the extent of any impact that has on corporate tax still needs to be reflected on.
it's an ongoing process, so
Yeah.
this is not the end of it. And would you advise the CFOs to have like an in-house tax team to help with all these changes?
I mean, it depends on the scale and size of the business and of the group. Most of my clients that are CEOs and CFOs of large organizations either have appointed heads of taxes to look after the businesses,
Yeah.
or have augmented and strengthened their
Right.
in-house tax teams to look after the new upcoming taxes, including in several impact assessment exercises that we've done. A part of our scope is also to comment on the readiness of the organization from a tax
Yeah.
resourcing standpoint.
Okay.
So, do they have the right tax resources and the
Okay.
right tax governance structure
Right.
to run now a complex set of corporate taxes, VAT, and other legislations, and Pillar 2 that's going to come in? Or should that be changed, augmented?
Yeah.
Should they structurally be doing something differently or operating differently as a tax function?
Right. And now moving on to, like, we can talk a little bit about tax technology, because as they say, it's the future of tax.
Yeah.
Everybody has been talking about it. But recently I just heard that e-invoicing is likely to be pushed forward to 2026. So this year, how do you perceive the demand for like a full-fledged tax technology practice?
See, I think if you ask me today, tax technology can help, or is already helping organizations that have settled legislation and settled processes and timelines for compliance.
Okay.
So if you look at a group that has multi-jurisdictional presence and has filings in multiple countries, whether that's tax filings, VAT filings,
Yeah.
or CBCR, where we know the format is clear,
Yeah.
we know the timelines are clear, we know that the notifications and the filing processes are almost clear. Technology can then be built around handling these
Right.
processes in multi-jurisdiction and in VAT as well. We now have the VAT form is ready. We now know what the positions are and what reports need to be filed. So to that extent, technology is certainly there and can help. But I think technology does need to be updated, which is bound to, for corporate tax and for Pillar 2. And Pillar 2 assessments and corporate tax compliances, and there we don't have the format yet, right? We don't have the format of the tax return for corporate tax, and while we do have some information that goes into or will go into a Pillar 2 return, we're still awaiting the qualified domestic minimum top-up tax legislation and those filings to come through. Again, that will be dependent on how each country implements legislation, and then how each country has their own administrative procedures for filings. So technology will continue to be involved and will continue to be enhanced and updated to take care of these additional filings and additional obligations that will come through that a head of tax will need to be mindful of.
Right. And as we are talking about tax technology, like, I also wanted to know your thoughts on the impact of artificial intelligence on tax.
See, I'm slightly old school on that you can't replace the traditional advisor. I mean, you could today look up a tax due diligence scope on ChatGPT. Right? You'll get an answer.
It's scary.
You'll get that. I think what in my view, and I may be wrong in time to come. In my view, AI will certainly be helpful for some of the more standard processes, as well as processes where you can feed in the relevant inputs in terms of to be able to enable AI to give you the outputs which are slightly more customized. But I think what will take time, and this may well evolve, is for the traditional. Is for AI to replace the traditional tax advisor when it comes to the planning aspects of it, when it comes to engaging with businesses to understand what their intentions are going forward and how should the structure be or operations need to be planned from a tax perspective, having regard to the future environment. Things like there's still several elements of vagueness in the legislation. Not vagueness,
Yeah.
but subjectivity when you look
Right.
at things like substance. Right? What is substance
Yes.
in whether you look at ESR or whether you look at the free zone regulations?
True.
We do have a list of substance conditions, but it's very facts and circumstances
Right.
based, right? POEM, effective management control, very
Exactly.
facts and circumstances based. I can't see, at least today, I can't see AI being able to advise on these areas without
Yeah.
going into the nitty-gritties of engaging with the business and understanding the business dynamics of a particular organization. It may be completely different to
Right.
to another one, and therefore what is substance for one may not be substance for another for the
True,
same set of
true.
criteria that one might apply. So I think certainly AI will certainly help, no doubt, and I do see that evolving and playing a big part in tax solutions and in tax services going forward. But I'd still rely on my own
Judgment.
intelligence or judgment or otherwise to be able to advise clients at
Yeah.
least as things stand today.
I'm quite old school myself. Like, I feel very uncomfortable with the thought of like using Chat GPT for writing some articles or something. So even now, I prefer to read a physical book than a Kindle. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
that much into technology. So I find it very scary. Like by 2030, I really wonder how tax practices are going to look like because technology is changing everything at such a fast pace. So it's going to be a different picture in the next 10, 20 years probably.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at even how taxes have tax practices or in-house tax functions have evolved. In the past, there was when BEPS was not an issue, there was a lot of focus on tax savings or tax planning, bordering on tax avoidance.
Yeah.
In some cases, where businesses were using intermediate companies in treaty countries without
Right.
substance, still getting the treaty benefits. And that's been plugged somewhat, obviously, with the principal purpose tests and BEPS 1 and now BEPS 2 and Pillar 2 and all of that's coming through, as you know. So the role of a tax head has now moved from avoiding or saving taxes to as to then moving to if managing their effective tax rate, which still exists as
Right.
in some sense. But now it's about managing taxes, tax compliance, tax documentation, and tax risk, tax reputation,
Right.
or reputation of the organization based on risk. So you now don't want the role of a head of tax is equally important in ensuring that the organization is operating as a good tax corporate citizen
Right.
in today's world, being in full compliance with the legislation, not just in the letter but also in spirit,
Yeah.
not engaging in any harmful practices, being optimizing taxes through legitimate legitimate rules and legitimate provisions of the law, backed by substance and commercial considerations. So I think that's how the role has evolved, the way
Yeah.
I look at it. And I think going forward, it will just the complexity will continue to increase, not not just in terms of what documentation or what they were doing in the past, but just the amount of taxes and tax compliance that
Yeah.
now businesses need to deal with or will
Right.
have to deal with going forward.
Yeah, true. And as I said, like it's not going to be just a tax podcast today. We're going to discuss some other little soft aspects of it as well. Like particularly, I wanted to know your thoughts on team building. So I know I've been supporting a lot of like consultancies in building a corporate tax practice, and at FTI, you have literally built the team from scratch. So, what are the key factors that you would look at while building the team? So, we have cultural diversity or regional experience or experience in more mature tax jurisdictions. So, how would you prioritize while hiring people in the team?
I think it'd be a mix of all of those factors that
Yeah.
you've talked about. Diversity is big on our agenda at FTI, and some of my more recent recruits are from absolutely different backgrounds
Okay.
culturally. Are male to female. The gender ratio is almost 50%.
Okay.
And that continues to be big on our agenda. So I think a combination of regional experience, obviously cultural diversity, regional experience, experience from different markets is important. But for me, the one thing that's most critical when I look to build out a team or to recruit an individual in the team is whether that individual is a team player
Right.
and has the right attitude.
Right.
So I think I don't need, you might be, brilliant at your work, technically great and an absolute superstar. But if you can't operate within the team,
Yeah.
for me, that does not take
Yeah.
priority. I need someone, and I would want someone in my team that has the right attitude to work and to be part of a growing business, but equally is a team player and will be out there supporting one another. And that's
Right.
how our organization operates and functions from a KPI and rewards perspective.
Yeah.
That's what we encourage. So that's the kind
Right.
of team. That's my actually number one priority, if you ask me.
Okay.
Everything else needs to fit the boxes. But team player and a positive attitude
Right.
is top of my list.
Absolutely. That's really important. I mean, but how would you judge that initially at the time of interviews?
It's difficult. I agree. It's difficult unless you know the person either directly or through
Yeah.
through a referral
Right.
process. So we do for individuals that we don't know, we do rely on their kind of past feedback
Okay.
and someone somewhere where they may have worked with.
Yeah.
If someone knows that candidate,
True.
that's what we try and do our homework. Obviously, as you know, being in the recruitment business, you can make mistakes at times,
Yeah.
and one needs to make sure that you learn from that and you move on. So that's part and parcel of
Exactly.
recruitment and growing
Right.
and growing a team. But it's hard, I agree, for individuals that you don't know and that you're looking
Yeah.
to recruit in the team.
But luckily, I think the tax world is quite small. So particularly in this region, everyone seems to be connected. With the big fours, or they would have worked together in the past or through some common references. So it's always easy to get a reference or something.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you're absolutely right.
So would you like to discuss any initiatives that you're passionate about, like coaching, mentoring, either personally or professionally?
Yeah, I think if you look at it, as I've now been in the tax world for a number of years now. I do enjoy the technical side of things. I do tend to read the legislation over and over again, and that's something I do encourage my team to do, is to not rely on memory while giving advice. Is to read the law and apply and read the law again before you advise. And in that sense, therefore, I'm quite keen and passionate about sharing my experience and sharing my knowledge with the tax community and those that are building a career in taxes, or those that are more in more junior roles in organizations. So I have spoken on a number of events and platforms. I'd like to do more. Obviously, time has always been a constraint. I'd clearly like to do more, but I'm quite passionate about it. I enjoy it. I enjoy presenting and sharing my perspectives and hopefully bringing in a different angle to the tax law and how it can be applied. And more importantly, what are the types of issues that one can come across in these. So I quite like that.
Right.
As I said, both the technical side as well as coaching or presenting at events on technical topics.
Yeah. So actually, one of the first events I attended at ICI Dubai was yours. So where you were speaking on the corporate taxes, and that was last year, back in January 2023. And it was brilliant. Like, I'm not even a corporate tax person, but I really, really enjoyed the seminar. So I can see that you're very passionate about your taxes and the experience that you bring out in most of the seminars.
It's good to see you didn't walk out of the room in the first 5 minutes.
No way. I was glued to my seat that time.
Good.
So regarding flexibility at work, I know FTI Consulting promotes flexibility, as do a lot of consultancies in this region. But what are your thoughts personally on flexibility? Like, do you like to work from office or home? And are you comfortable with the idea of your colleagues working flexibly?
Yeah, so in that sense, I'm not that old school. I do encourage the flexible working environment or the flexible working policy. We do have that at FTI, and I'm one for. So I personally tend to get a lot done in the office than at home.
Okay.
So, personally, I'd rather go in to the office to do a difficult or to do a more complex piece of work as opposed to doing that at home. But equally, I do look at where my meetings are and where the offices are and where do I need to be and do operate flexibly. And it's the same as with the team. While we do have we do encourage the team to come in regularly where, you do need to discuss together as a team because you can get a lot out. But we and I are quite flexible in terms of how teams operate. The only thing that I would want in a flexible policy is for teams to be more communicative with one another in terms of their whereabouts and what their availability is. If they're working from home, are there times that you're not available or accessible? And there needs to be clear communication as to what each one is doing or what the teams are doing. I think if we get that mix right, then I think the flexible working environment can work quite well. And I think I would encourage that. But yeah, overall, I'm quite I'm very positive about teams operating flexibly, working from home if the need be.
I think things have changed after COVID, and there are pros and cons to both. Like personally, I prefer to have that balance between working from home and office. And my colleagues always complaining that even when I'm in office, I'm just like hiding out in some quiet place. I'm never on my desk. So that's what they're complaining about. But yeah, there's a different fun in like being in office, working together with the colleagues. So that connection should still be maintained, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're, at the end of the day, we are social beings.
Yeah.
Right? So there's only so much you can do. You will not you will not call someone on Teams just to say, hi, how are you doing?
Right.
But you would do that when you're in the office
Exactly.
and it's surprising. And particularly in the consulting world, I've seen that, and this was particularly acute during COVID, is that when I went into the office, and this was back when I was in a Big Four, but it was strange how when you saw a fellow partner and you walked up and just to say hello or say grab a coffee, it was amazing how there could easily be 2 or 3 follow-on opportunities that you invariably discuss, which you take forward.
Exactly.
Which you wouldn't do on a Teams call, or you wouldn't do if you were working from home more often than not. So I've seen for me, I benefit more from being in the office than being at home. But equally, I do enjoy the flexibility at times when you need to get some personal stuff done, and meetings are closer to home as opposed to the office.
You would be surprised. I speak to a lot of candidates, and the reason they want to leave their current job is like because it's purely work from home. They don't have a team to work with.
Oh, right. Okay.
They end up feeling like really frustrated because after COVID, I mean, during the COVID years, it was fine, but now they're based in some part of the world, and it's just like a one-person tax team in that country, and they're just purely working from home. So that's the reason people want to come back to work, like be a part of a bigger team. So I do get these kind of requests as well. And on the flip side, like people want a balance as well. So it's not like 100% work from offices and they are not very comfortable. So I get these feedback from candidates on both sides.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think if you look at, from your perspective, and certainly for mine, if I get a candidate that, has a strong preference of only work from home.
Yeah.
Yeah, that for me in at least in house, I don't know how that would be, but it would be for me would be slightly more that would have some alarm bells or red flags because in consulting, at least, working entirely from home doesn't work.
It's so dynamic.
It doesn't work. Absolutely. You need to be part of team. You need to be talking to clients. You need to be discussing issues with your team.
Right.
So that I don't think that works, but, absolutely, flexible working policies and arrangements is something I think we're now in a world where this is part of life.
Exactly. And what would be your tips for job seekers who are looking at relocating to the UAE and say build a career in tax? Because currently I see like Dubai is the place to be.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to move here. So like literally candidates from all parts of the world, mainly like they want to experience the new tax legislation. They want to be a part of the whole implementation phase, and also for quality of life and multiple reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's I mean, I can sense sometimes the frustrations that some of the the new talent that's looking to come into the UAE might face. I think I would say it's not an easy. I think there is a lot of tax professionals that are looking to
Yeah.
move, probably more than the jobs that are
Right.
out there, at least currently. And everybody who's looking, whether it's consulting or in-house, wants someone who already has regional or local tax experience.
Right.
Which if someone's coming from outside, you're never going to have that on day
Exactly.
one. So I would say, make sure you're already read up on the UAE tax legislation, whether it's VAT or whether it's corporate tax and Pillar 2. Make sure you've read up on not just the legislation, but also on the types of businesses that operate in the UAE. And I'm sure
Yeah.
whoever's looking to move to the UAE may have some friend, some colleague already in the UAE that they can rely on and consult with. So do that. Be aware of how businesses operate in the region, what types of businesses,
Yeah.
what types of issues are there. Take an interest and obviously be prepared to, not saying in all cases, but be prepared to, rationalize your career or your immediate career move or your immediate career pay, if that may
Yeah.
be, with a view to settling into the right place. Because
Right.
once you're in, and once you're in the market and you've figured the law of the land, then it's easier to make sure you are then mobile to get to the right role
Yeah.
and right organization that suits your skill sets
Yeah.
and suits your career aspirations.
True.
So I'm fortunate that I came in at a time when there actually weren't any taxes in the region. So I've had the opportunity and been fortunate to be part of the entire journey that UAE and the region has gone through on taxes, and it's become a lot more competitive now. But I think have that patience, read up, be connected,
Yeah.
and talk to you,
Yes,
right?
of course. Yes.
For the right opportunity.
And I'll surely pass on the words of wisdom to my network of candidates, because that's what I've been asked usually. Like, what's the best way to relocate and kind of have that advantage over locally based candidates. So this is really useful. And lastly, this question is mainly on you. Like, you've had a very successful journey in tax, of course. But if you were to reflect on your career journey, are there any things that you wish you could have done differently?
It's a good question. I mean, you do reflect on this from time to time. I think I wouldn't. I am happy and content in terms of where I am and what I've achieved. So one side of me says I wouldn't do anything differently. But I think but if I was to introspect slightly deeper, I would think that, perhaps a short stint in-house. So I've never
Okay.
been in-house. I've always been in consulting.
Yeah.
And I do enjoy the consulting side of it. I don't, never say never, but I think I'd be a better advisor than an in-house person. But I think a stint in-house would, at some point in my career in the past, would have
Yeah.
helped just to get the different or the perspective from the other side. So that's probably one. And I think, I did think that at some point, perhaps when I was going through my studies and my qualifications, I probably thought that some sort of a degree or some sort of course or degree in law would have helped. Because I think
Okay.
Tax at the end of the day is a legislation, but I think there are lots of intricacies and crossovers between the tax aspect of it, or
Yeah.
the taxation, but also the legal side of things. So I think that would have helped. But I think now through the years, it's quite clear you can't be specializing in both.
Yeah.
So I think those are the two things I may have done
Right.
may have done differently. I don't lose sleep over it, but since you asked the question, I thought those are the two
Great.
things that come to mind.
Thank you for sharing this. That's interesting. And of course, in-house role would give a different perspective on what happens on the other side, but it's never too late. So would you
Yeah.
consider this in the future? Like, I mean, not immediately, of course. I mean, I know you would prefer the consulting side of it, but probably would you consider that in the future?
All I'll say is never say never, and then we can leave it at that.
Yeah, of course. So we are just about to end the episode, and I wanted to like end it on a lighter note with some fun questions about yourself. So
Okay.
I know you've been like quite a global citizen living in different countries. So which would be your most preferred place? Like if you say UAE, India, or the UK?
I mean, I think each one of those countries has had a special time and place in my life personally, and I've enjoyed my time personally and professionally in all of these locations. I think UAE is now what I consider home.
Okay.
And I do enjoy I do enjoy the country. I do enjoy everything it has had to offer. I think it's a great place to live. The vision of the leadership has been fantastic. We've now had, obviously now with taxes coming in, there is something for tax professionals to make
Yeah.
a mark in this country. I still enjoy the UK. I love to go back there on a holiday, and I'm glad I did the journey the way I did. I moved from India
Yeah.
to the UK and then
Right.
to the Middle East. I don't think I'd be able to do it the other way around. So I think for now it is the UAE. I enjoy this place the most. This is where
Okay.
I would consider home for now.
Yeah, that's true. I think UAE is that way. It's just like it grows on you, the city. So even I had this plan. We went back to India. We wanted to settle there, but I think we were missing Dubai so much. We came back. So this is like literally my second stint here.
Oh, okay. And I think the one thing that I'd say to whoever's lived or looking at UAE or just moving to the UAE or any other country actually is that it's very unlikely you'll find a place, a country, a city which will tick all the boxes.
Yeah, true.
So you won't get everything right in any country that you live
Yeah.
in. I think if it ticks most boxes for you personally and professionally,
Yeah,
I think that's where you need
Exactly.
to. That's what matters.
true. And any travel plans in 2024 on your bucket list?
So yeah, I think 24 should. I think with Eid coming on, there's a
Yes.
great. It's a good question. There are I do love to travel. I've traveled a fair bit, but there's still lots that I'd like to see. I certainly think if I do get a chance, Japan is one on my
Oh, wow.
on my bucket list soon enough. If hopefully
Okay.
this year, but if not, then at some point in time. And then several other locations. But yeah, travel is one that I do enjoy
Yeah.
and look forward to doing that at any opportunity that I get.
This year is going to be very busy, so you would really need to carve out some time for the travel.
Yeah, so it's not. So it'll be around the
Yeah,
Eid
the
breaks
Eid
and
break.
the holidays and perhaps shorter trips
Yeah.
compared to longer. I don't think longer breaks is now
Right.
is going to be that easy. But hopefully make the most of what
Mm.
the opportunities are in terms of downtime.
Yeah. And lastly, my question is like that is something to think about. So if you had like 25 hours in a day, how would you spend that extra 1 hour?
Wow, it's a good question. If I had, I'd ideally like 3 hours more in the day if I wanted to. An hour more to sleep, an hour more to read, I think.
Yeah.
And I would put that probably top of the list.
Okay.
An hour more to perhaps focus on something slightly more, recreational or relaxation, either in terms of, meditation or any of that.
Yeah.
More on the relaxation side, to just get your mind and body
Right.
off the rigors of the daily life. But I think if there was one thing would be to be able to read more.
Okay.
Because I don't think we do enough. But not
Yeah.
just not just
Right.
read tax. I think that
Just fun reading.
yeah, just but both, right? So if
Yeah.
you look at my to do list on my, I have a folder in my thing which says your reading material that just kind of grows. So you need to
Yeah.
find time to do that, and it's not easy. But then even outside of that, I think just being generally aware of and get different perspectives. I don't
Yeah.
think we get time to do that. So I'd probably
Right.
put that on the top of the list.
True. Sometimes like we just forget the reading part, and sometimes it's just fun reading, but it just goes like towards the end of our to-do list for the day. That's great, and I'm really glad I really enjoyed the discussion with you, and thank you for joining us today. So I would just get a small token.
Oh, you didn't have to.
Oh,
Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoy this.
Yeah, no, it looks
A healthy hamper.
very exotic. Thank you very much, and thank you
Thank
for
you.
for having me join this discussion. It's given me time to think about a few things that you asked about. So no, really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you very much, and
Great.
thanks for having me over.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to us today, and I hope you'll found this podcast informative and insightful. Please feel free to reach out to us because we would love to hear from you, your feedback, or any questions that you may have. And goodbye for now. Hope you have a lovely Eid break ahead, and see you on our next tax episode.